begin recording, these being the words of Resken, once known as the Prophet of Clarity, now a resident of a foreigner shield world known by its Sangheili inhabitants, the Ussans, as the Refuge. As I explore this magnificent work of the foreigners, I am equally saddened by the carnage wrought on this colony by the recent Ussan civil war. It wasn't so long ago that my Sangheili comrades and I intervened and reawakened the oracle of this world that brought a swift end to the blood-sickened Sangheili Ussans. As this blood-sick plague ends, I'm curious on what came from this pandemic, this Way of Greftus group they call themselves. I've spoken to Kaidan Baltor Zealous to gather information on this group, as the historian in me thirsts for information regarding both sides in this dark chapter of the Ussans. He has divulged much about these rebels, and now I am confident to make an official account of the Greftus faction for all within the Refuge. Established sometime in the 26th century, the Greftus faction, named after the long-dead rebel leader from the 5th section of the Refuge, Way of Greftus, had emerged. They cried apocalypse when the decay of the colony had become evident, with Insa declaring that the forgotten gods, as they called them, supposed entities channeled psychically by Greftus, wanted the Sangheili to depart the colony with the ancient ships who had brought their ancestors to the shield world all those centuries ago that still survived in the primary section in order to find the fabled homeworld of their people, Sangheili. The forgotten gods supposedly told Greftus the way back to the homeworld, which some thought of as purely mythological. The Kaidan's uncle and Xerxes Zealous dismissed Greftus's claims, stating that he was suffering from blood sickness, a disease that induced madness and aggression among the Ussans. The initial Greftusian uprising was thus quelled when Xerxes Zealous had Greftus arrested and then publicly executed by ejecting him from an airlock into space. That had put an end to the idea of forgotten gods and other such rubbish. But years later, around the time of the Great Schism, a resurgence of the Way of Greftus arose in Section 5, this time led by a Sangheili who called himself Kinza, claiming to have shared his body with the spirit of Way of Greftus. Kinza voiced out Greftusian ideals and initiated another uprising in the colony. According to Kinza, the dilapidation of the Refuge's structural pieces was proof of the wrath of the forgotten gods. He further claimed that through his connection to Greftus, he channeled the wrath of the Ussan deity, known as Foreigner Sun. But the official records of the primary Refuge said he is just another blood-sickened Sangheili by the name of Oscar Melon. Kaidan Baltor Zealous immediately sought to end this rebirth of the Greftus faction and confronted Kinza and his followers outside the Hall of the God Mines, where the statues of the great Ussa Zealous and his descendants stood throughout the centuries. Baltor offered these blood-sick Sangheili a chance to live in isolation until a cure for the disease could be found. However, Kinza refused to be apprehended and a violent standoff ensued. Baltor had underestimated the influence of Kinza in the section, and he and his patrollers were unable to detain him as he escaped from the area with a handful of insurgents. As the revolt grew in the following months, the Greftus faction succeeded in taking control of sections 2, 3, 4 and 5, where there were harsh privation, worsening air quality, food rations cut to minimum, martial law declared, and enforced worshipping of Greftus and Kinza himself ensued, and there were more outbreaks of savagery from blood sickness, and after the capture of Zealous's young second-in-command, Katens, Kinza ordered Baltor to surrender to him in exchange for Katens's freedom. Instead, Baltor challenged him to a float fight match in the combat section to determine which side would rule the Refuge. Float fighting is a common sport among these people as it tempers the warlike nature of the Sangheili. Kinza reluctantly accepted his offer after being pressured by his followers, and so the battle for the Refuge had begun. It was at that time when our ship, the Journey's Sustenance, finally discovered the colony after nearly a year of searching for Ussans' lost legacy. Our Hurugok, sluggish drifter, managed to repair the colony's slumbering oracle, enduring bias, and it quickly aided the Kaiden as he was nearly killed by one of Kinza's followers. Even the Mad Prophet himself tried to kill the Flying Voice, as the colonists call it, but the Monitor eviscerated Kinza when his efforts proved futile. Though their leader was killed, the Greftusian insurgents refused to give up the territory they had gained in their failed bid for control of the Refuge, and the Kaiden gave the Oracle permission to liberate the sections and destroy the rebels. I was astonished by the awesome power and accuracy of enduring bias, as it aided the Ussans Sangheili in purging the Refuge of the stink of Greftus from the Hall of Godminds. After helping quell the rebellion, Bias and the Hurugok worked together to form a cure for the remaining Sangheili afflicted by blood sickness. There they found the cause of the epidemic through a malfunctioning protein synthesizer, and thus the Way of Greftus was snuffed out and the rebuilding of the colony commenced, as the pieces of the broken circle were made whole. It's funny, when I witnessed the reassembly process, it appeared as a small halo in my eyes, yet now I see it as a symbol of a renewed world, rising up from the fires of disease and that of war.